What's up guys, and welcome back to a new tutorial. Today we're going to be going over the basics of After Effects. We're going to jump into the software and I'm going to show you around the landscape so you guys can get your heads around how we go about working within the software. So let's dive straight in. Cool, so as we open After Effects, this is what we're going to be met with. So this is the default view of the software. If this isn't how it comes through, we're going to go to Window, we're going to go to Workspace, and we'll go to say Reset Effects to save layouts. It might also come through as say all panels. I'd recommend, however, using the default effects view of the software, especially to begin with, because it has all the things you kind of need when you first start jumping into the software. So right away we can see we have a project panel. This is basically like in Premiere, where you're going to keep all your assets, you're going to keep your video, you're going to keep your sequences, you're going to keep basically anything that you make in After Effects is going to be held in this panel. So this is kind of like your Explorer or your Finder windows in Mac. Click along, we got our effects control, so that's where we're going to load in our various effects. Cool, we have our composition window. This is where you're going to see the video that we're creating. Just so you know, a composition essentially does just mean video. It's what we're trying to make in After Effects. So if we make a new composition, we'll have what looks like what is an empty video. The more we load into that black composition, the more we're going to start building up our animations. So let's do that. Let's start making a composition. So let's go to Project, and I'm going to go down to this little thing here. That is your create new composition. If you prefer, you can think of it as create new video, and then this little box will come out, this little dialog box, and it's going to give you some options as to how you want your composition. So let's name it into something. We'll call it Our First Comp. Our First Comp. You have some presets here. I usually just go for custom, so I can hone in the settings myself. I'm going to do a HD sequence. 1920 by 1080 is correct, but you could do anything you want. You could do 3840 by 2160, which is UHD. You could do 720 by 480, which is technically HD footage, but it's 720p footage. So let's go back to 1920 by 1080. Square pixels as standard is correct. I'm going to do 25 frames per second because that is the standard for the UK. It's going to ask what I want my resolution quality to be. I'll go to full because my computer can probably handle it. But if you have a slightly older PC or a slightly cheaper PC or a Mac, you might want to set this down to quarter quality. But you can change this later depending on how your computer is dealing with the software. Duration, how long do you want the sequence? I'm just going to go for a 10-second sequence. And background color, that doesn't really matter. And here we go, this is our first comp. And as you can see, as we scrub around the sequence, there's nothing happening. That's because our sequence is completely empty at the minute. So we'll start loading some stuff in there to kind of fill up our composition. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add what's called a solid. And I guess you could just consider this as just like a block of color, which... you could just, this is literally just a block of color that you're going to add into your sequence. I'll press Command Y or Control Y on a PC. I'm going to call it black solid, and yeah, I'm happy with the color black. Press OK, and boom, got ourselves a black solid. We can move it around. If we press S on our keyboard, we can scale it. We can press R, rotate it. So there we go, we got ourselves a black solid on our composition. Now let's have a look through some of the other panels. So we've got over here on the right hand side, we got our effects and presets. This is really where we're going to spend a lot of our time within After Effects. For instance, let's just grab a random effect. Let's go to noise and grain, and let's say maybe go to this one called fractal noise, and let's just add that to our black solid. And as you can see, we've got this kind of cloud layer, which we can mess around with the evolution, and it'll just kind of like change over time. So there we go. So that's the effects column. I won't go into all the effects now because there's so many of them. I think there's hundreds of effects within After Effects, and that's just as a standard. You can add effects into the software. I'll leave these and we'll just kind of go over those in future videos. You got your preview panel here, which basically lets you press play on your sequence. You can go forward one frame, you can go to the end of the sequence, you go to the start of the sequence, you go back one frame. I don't tend to use this because you could just use the space bar to play your sequence. You also have your properties panel up here, which allows you to transform move around your solid. You can change your position, scale, the anchor point, the opacity, and the rotation of your solid. I don't tend to use that one because I just go to I can just click my solid in the timeline, and I can use the keyboard shortcuts to toggle the transform property that I want to mess around with. So P for position, T for opacity, R for rotation, S for scale. We can go to our effects as well by pressing E, and that's pretty much it. So I tend to use my keyboard shortcuts to toggle on my effects, but you can use this panel up here if you want. Let's have a look into this top toolbar. So there's a home button that basically just takes us to our load project, new project type screen. We got a selection tool, which is what I've got now, which you basically just is quite useful to just use just around the composition. You can move stuff, you can click effects. You got your hand tool, so that lets you kind of move around your composition a little bit if you want a different view. You can press V for selection tool or H on your keyboard for hand tool. You got the zoom tool. You can zoom in and out of your composition with this tool. I don't tend to use this that much. I use Control or Command minus or Control plus to zoom in. You have these tools, which are grayed out at the minute. These are for 3D layers. So it's your camera tool, so you can kind of move around the camera. So if I was to go to my timeline and just click on my 3D layer, now I can press the C and toggle between these camera properties. So I'll start with the in and out tool, so I can just pull out away from my object. I can go to my orbit tool and just orbit around my object. I can use the transform tool, which means I can just go up and down. But 3D objects aren't something we need to concern ourselves with at the minute. Over here we've got a rotation tool, just means I can rotate my object. I've got my pan behind tool, which is how I can move my anchor point. An anchor point is essentially where you want, is a point on a particular layer where you want the effects, the transform values to kind of manipulate from. So if I was to do rotate, it will rotate about this point. I could move the anchor point and press Y, move it to the center. And then when I press R this time, I'll just rotate around the center. It works the same with scale as well, scale about that point. An important thing to remember is to always manipulate your anchor point before you start animating anything, as a general rule of thumb. So we now have our rectangle tool, or our shape tool. If you press and hold that, you can see rectangle, rounded rectangle, ellipse, polygon tool, star tool. This is good for two things. One, you can make a mask, which basically is an area of a layer that you want to see and cut out the area of the layers you don't want to see. So if I was to go to my ellipse tool and then just make sure my black solid is selected and do this. Now I'm only seeing the part of this layer that's in that bounding box. Press Ctrl Z to undo that. Press Q to toggle through the tools. And let's get the polygon tool. And then, yeah, just do that. Now I got a little star. Lovely. I can also use this tool to create shapes. Shape layers are similar to solid layers in a way, except you have way more control over them. So there we go, I got myself a star. It's got a border and it's got a color in the middle. And if I go to my shape layer down here in my timeline, you can see the polystar path. You see it's got a stroke, which basically means an outline. And then you've got fill. So I can start toggling these off. And I can start messing around with the width of the stroke, changing the color of the stroke, maybe make that red. You know, I can taper the lines. There's a lot you can do with shape layers, and I will go into them in future videos. But they're super useful, and it's a powerful tool. But that's how you go about finding them in this top panel. So I'll delete that for now. Go back to my black solid. We have a pen tool, which is similar to the shape or mask tool. You can actually do a manual mask. So if I was to just do now I'll only see this area of my solid. And exactly the same theory when it comes to using this for a shape tool. If I don't select my solid and just do this, we have ourselves a shape. Cool. Text tool does what it says on the tin. Text. We also have a brush tool. which is something that you have to do inside the layer panel. It will open up a new window and it will allow you to kind of draw on your layer, and you can keyframe this. See, you've got a paint effect now. I could go, I could keyframe this and I could start just drawing manually on my layer, sort of like traditional animation. Let's go back to our composition. You can see I've got it all drawn on. Stamp tool, this is similar in Photoshop, where you can use to duplicate parts of the image onto another part of your image. This will open up in the layer panel as well. If I hold Alt, do that, and then click there, I'm going to start to take this part of my image and put it over there. I can hold, if I press hold Control and Shift to the right, I'll get a bigger brush. There we go. Let's go back to our composition. Got an eraser tool, exactly the same as in Photoshop. I can go here and start erasing part of my image in my layer panel. Now we've got a rotor brush tool. It's not very useful here, but this is what we use to cut out parts of our video. So we can draw around a person, and After Effects will work out how to propagate that cutout over an entire video. It's really useful, and we'll go into that in another video. We also have the puppet pin tool. Again, we'll go into that in another video, but essentially this is a way that you can distort your image. If I was to press on the puppet pin tool or go Control or Command P, I can now move around my image and distort it based on these points. Cool, so that's the main tools. Let's have a little look at what we have in our composition panel. So we can change the resolution of our video. We can change the scaling of our of the video inside the panel. I could go to like 800% if I really want to zoom in and pixel peep. I can go to 1.5% if I want to do kind of a more macro look. I generally stay on fit to 100%. If I click Toggle Transparency Grid, this grid shows what parts of the video will be visible when it's rendered. So if I was to render this now as an alpha, a video which honors the transparency grid, I could put, when I render it, all this will be see-through. So I could put this on top of a video in Premiere, and the background would be see-through. All I'd have is this text, and I'd have this solid. If I don't render it as an alpha, this will all just be black. So for instance, so if I was to toggle this transparency grid off, it'll show me how it will render it. There we go, just like this. Toggle masks and paths. Basically, that's just going to show me my masks and stuff I've created. I've not created any yet, but let's create one. Let's make a little mask there. Cool. And if I was to turn that off, it won't show me that line. I generally keep it on because it's quite useful. Region of interest, I can click and drag a box, just so After Effects is going to focus my view so I can see what it is. If there's a certain part of the image I want to focus on, that's what I use, but I rarely use this effect. This one's useful. Title. If you click this drop-down menu, you'll get stuff like title and action save, so this will keep you, show you where your safe areas are. It will show you where your half points are on your vertical and horizontal, and it shows you center point. We also have a proportional grid, which is just a series of lines evenly spaced. We got a regular grid, which is the same thing but even more focused. And then we got a ruler. We can start clicking and dragging like points that we want, so we can measure out our compositions. Up in the very top panel, we got various other ways of accessing the same things we've talked about. So if we go to File, we got, you got your New, you got your Open, you got your Save. Pretty basic stuff. Import footage. Things. There's some more in-depth stuff here that you probably don't need to know about quite yet. So, for instance, dependencies or scripts. For now, we're just going to look at the basic stuff. Let's go to Edit. We've got Undo. We've got Cut. We've got Labels. That's a way to change the colors of your layers so you can keep organized. You can go. You've got keyboard shortcuts here. I've got the defaults and I've updated them a little bit to kind of include some extra ones. But if you ever want to change what the keyboard shortcut leads to which tool, this is where you do it. Composition, new composition settings. You can save the frame that you're on as a Photoshop file or just as a JPEG. You got your layer, which basically just gives you more access to new masks, to transform qualities. You can make a new camera here. Cameras are used for 3D layers, which we'll go into later. You got another way of getting your effects. You've got an animation drop down where you can access things like Mocha, Boris FX Mocha, which is a tracking software. You can do a keyframe assistant, which will help you, which will smooth out the movement between keyframes. Speaking of which, let's talk about keyframes. So keyframes are the fundamental of what we use to animate within After Effects. So if I was to press P and bring up the position on my black solid, let's say I want to move the black solid from the left-hand side of the screen to the right. Let's click position. And then there's a little stopwatch here. I'm going to click the stopwatch. And as you can see, it's made this little diamond thing at the start. Let's drag over to 4 seconds. And now let's move the solid over. And as you can see now, the solid moves just like that. And we've done our first little bit of keyframing there, guys. That's our first animation, and it's beautiful, and I love it. That's essentially how you do it. Do keyframing, and you basically extrapolate this information and compound it to make really involved and impressive effects. I'm also going to highlight these keyframes, and I'm going to hit F9. That is what we call eases the keyframes. So it means they gradually speed up and then gradually slow down, rather than starting from 0, hitting a speed the whole time and then stopping. They do a bit of an acceleration and deceleration, which is makes them feel a little bit more organic. So if we have a look now, it starts slow, speeds up, gets to a maximum point, and then slows down, which makes it feel much more natural. You can click the keyframes, and you can go to this graph editor layer, and you can really hone in the how you want the layers to the keyframes to animate. So this one, I've dragged out this handle, and it's going to start off really slow, it's going to get really fast, and then slow down again. So let's have a look at that. Nice and slow, nice and slow, nice and slow, and then boom, does a lot of movement, and then slows down. So you can go into detail here, guys, on how exactly you want your keyframes to look. What I'm also going to do is I'm going to go to my black solid and see there's a few values down here. There's things like this guy with a long nose. That's your shy layer. Compositions tend to get quite busy with the more you add layers into After Effects. It wouldn't be unheard of to have say 50-60 layers within your animation. Or pre-comps with their own 50-60 layers within. So it can get quite messy quite quick. So if I want to start, like say for instance, this text layer I'm done with, I don't really want to see again. I know that is exactly how I want it to be. I could lock it over here, and I could shy it, and I can click this shy guy up here, and boom, it's disappeared. And if I want to see it again, I can click the shy guy again. But it starts to make my compositions a little bit cleaner, so I don't have to worry about for instance, accidentally deleting them or making some changes. I can just concentrate on the layers that are important. This cog here is called collapse transformation data. It's quite useful. You will see it used in the future, but it essentially means the transform and value 3D values from other layers or other softwares, bring them into this layer. So for instance, if I have a 3D layer that I bring into this composition, it will just be a 2D layer until I click this, in which case it will tell After Effects to use the 3D properties of that layer in this layer. We'll look at that a little bit more later, but it can be quite useful. This is important. This is the motion blur. Click the motion blur, and that will simulate the motion blur of movement and make things look a little bit more real. So let's have a look at how that looks on this layer. There we go. And if we pause there, we're starting to see the edges of the layer blur based on the fact that the object is moving quite fast. This is really important. I'd recommend almost always having this on unless you're going for a particular type of effect. So there we go. Nice and blurry around the edges. And it basically just makes it look like more like real life. We've got our 3D layer. Again, we've already talked about 3D layers. Now let's talk about pre-comps. So now if we, for instance, let's press Command Y and bring in a red solid. And let's mask that solid. So there's just a circle on it. And let's move that solid there. As your compositions start getting more complicated, we want to start consolidating our sequence into smaller sequences that can kind of be lumped together, so we can manipulate them independently of the top sequence. So for instance, if I wanted the black solid and the red solid to be 1, for instance, we'd copy, highlight both of these, we right click and we go pre-compose, and we call this black solid red dot. Now both of our solids are gone. What we have is this thing here, which is a new pre-comp, which is essentially just another sequence. We just work backwards. And if we go within, if you notice our text layer is gone, that's because that's a part of the top sequence and not a part of this pre-comp. It looks pretty much the same, but for instance, if I go into this sequence now, I can add stuff in. I could maybe manipulate this a little bit more. I could keyframe our puppet pin. This is useful, for instance, if I wanted to have a character. I'd probably pre-comp the character, and if I wanted to do any specific effects to the character, I'd do that within the pre-comp, because there's no point adding extra layers to your master comp. You want to start consolidating things that can be consolidated. Cool. I can also do a thing called parenting. Let's see this pick whip here, this little circle, this little spiral. I'm going to take my text layer, I'm going to parent it to the black solid. And now let's say I wanted to make our solid bigger. It will now also make our text layer bigger. So let's say I can animate those together. Press the stopwatch and zoom in. And now these will both animate together. There we are. Real work of art, this. Cool, and there's one last thing I'd probably like to talk about in this video, guys. Obviously, there's so much you can do within After Effects. We'll kind of get into that as we expand our knowledge of the software. But I'm going to talk about alpha mats because these are really useful. So what we can do with masks inside of After Effects is that we can tell After Effects what part of a particular layer we want to be visible. But there's other ways we can do this, and sometimes they're better. So for instance, say we want to see in this text layer, we don't want it to be black, but we want it to be this layer. So we want to see the texture and the red in the shape of the text. Well, we could mask the word text into this layer, like so. If I was to go do. Okay, well there's a T. Let's do an E. Okay, now we've got an E. We could do that, but that is not going to work very well. It's going to take ages, and it's just not going to be worth it. There's a much quicker way to do it. So let's bring my text layer above this layer. There we go. And yeah, so let's line these up, and let's bring this just in here. And now I can use what's called an alpha mat, so I can only see the part of this layer where the text layer is. So let's see what I mean. So let's go to toggle switches and modes. And it should show a new menu. We got modes here, and we got track mat. Let's go to the track mat side of things, and we're going to click it down, and then it should come up with all the layers in the sequence. You're going to tell After Effects which layer you want to track mat with. So what I'm going to want to do is I need to click the layer that I want to see, the actual layer that I will want to see in the end. And that will be, you might think it's the text layer. It's not. You want the text layer to be a stencil of this layer. So essentially you're going to want to see this solid, this black solid red dot. So let's click the black solid red dot, and let's go to track mat, and let's drop down, and let's click text. And boom, straight away we can only see the part of that layer where the text layer is. And let's see, that'll animate as well. And there we go, we have an animation there, and that looks, I mean, maybe you'd find a purpose for that, I don't know, but it looks, if that's what you're aiming for, that would look pretty good. And that is alpha mats, and there's so many uses of these types of effects, and I'd highly recommend getting familiar with what I mean. I can also invert it, so I could do, for instance, this. So I can only see everything that's outside of the text layer. I could also do a luma mat, which will only show the parts of the layer which are bright. So if I go to this, click black solid, and then change it to a luma mat, suddenly I can only see the parts of the image which are white would be fully visible, black would be fully invisible. which is quite useful for transitions. I'll show you how to do that in future videos. I guess there's one more thing that we'll talk about while we're in this panel, and that will be the overlay effects. So let's bring a texture into this composition. So I've got this piece of paper, and I want it to, I want to add this kind of texture to my text. I'm going to go to my black solid red dot. I want to add this in here. I'm going to bring it to the top, and I want to add kind of a paper feel. So let's rotate. Oh, let's rotate this. Scale it up. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to toggle switches and modes. I'm going to go to my modes, and you've got loads of options here. And basically, this is just telling After Effects how you want the layers up at the top, the layer that with the blending mode to interact with the layers below. So you could do stuff like, you know, only see the darker colors, only see, you know, the lighter colors. You can do a thing called screen, which is some kind of variation of the lighten blending mode. Your overlay, which makes it more contrasty. There's lots of things you can do here, and I'd recommend experimenting with all of them. But there is a handful you tend to use all the time. And for instance, let's go to overlay. And straight away, we see it's done some stuff to the back, our layer. Let's maybe go to screen. Screen looks pretty cool. So straight away, we can see we've added some texture to our flag stuffing. If we go back to our top comp, now it looks like this. And I think that's everything, guys. That is the fundamentals of After Effects. Obviously, there's so much more that we can dive into. We won't today. The best thing to do is to see them in practice, but get your head around the software. Maybe have a little experiment with some of the effects, a little experiment with some of the tools, and do some basic keyframing, some basic position and transforming. And join me in the next video where we'll start to really unpack how powerful these tools are once they're compounded together. So I'll see you guys in the next video.